Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome to the Gardening Simplified show on location. So it's early August, and as you can see, the hydrangeas here in our trial garden are off the chain. So Rick and I thought we would come out here and kind of give you a little lay of the land, talk about our hydrangea trialing, show you some of the highlights of the garden, and you can see what really goes on here at Proven Winners ColorChoice Shrubs. So as we go through this tour, you are going to notice a lot of hydrangea macrophylla or bigleaf hydrangeas. And everything that's out here has passed our initial trialing. So it's been in the greenhouse. We've determined that it blooms like we want it to. It has good stem strength. It has good potential for introduction. And before we make that decision, we bring them out here to give them a landscape trial. So everything out here is planted in groups of 3, just in case something goes wrong with one of them. And what our R&D team will be doing is observing these over a period of several years, just to make sure that they perform after repeated different types of winter. Some of them will be pruned improperly just to see what happens, and of course to make sure that they look amazing every single summer, summer after summer. Of course, I had to make a stop in front of one of my all-time favorite plants in this garden. Rick, do you know what this is?
Oh, let me see if I can get the pronunciation right. Esculus?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You can finish it off for me.
This is Esculus parviflora.
That's what I meant to say.
Our native bottlebrush buckeye. So everyone knows, well, not everybody, but a lot of Midwesterners know the Ohio buckeye, which of course is the state tree of Ohio. But we have other native horse chestnuts as well. And this is a shrubby horse chestnut that blooms here at the height of summer. It brings out with these beautiful long racemes of flowers. They have these gorgeous long anthers that protrude. It's super fragrant. It's absolutely covered in pollinators. This is not a Proven Winners ColorChoice shrub. This is just a plant that happens to be in our garden. It probably never will be a Proven Winners ColorChoice shrub because it's a little bit big for most people's yards. But if you are into natives and you have the space for it, this is such an incredible plant to add to your landscape.
Beautiful.
Ready? Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I got distracted.
Just admire.
Does anyone recognize this plant? You recognize it?
Yeah, I do.
What is it?
It's a lace cap hydrangea, and you're going to tell me what variety.
Yeah. This is Tuff Stuff Ah-Ha. So this is one of the newer
Tough stuff.
This is one of the newer varieties in the Tuff Stuff series. And one of the things that makes it special is that it has these kind of semi-doubled water lily-like flowers. And as you can see, this is one of those hydrangeas that will turn pink or blue depending on the soil chemistry, and this one's kind of in the midst of changing. And the Tuff Stuff series, as you may recall, are mountain hydrangeas, which means that they come from colder regions of Japan than their close cousins, bigleaf hydrangeas. So they tend to have better bud hardiness than bigleaf hydrangeas. So if you can't necessarily get reliable bloom on most bigleaf hydrangeas, Tuff Stuff Ah-Ha is a great choice.
I find Tough Stuff to be one of the most reliable blooming hydrangeas in my landscape.
And you get to look forward to this every year.
Unreal.
So Rick is over there exploring our rose trials. And much like the hydrangea trial that I was just talking about, what we have here are roses that have passed the greenhouse phase of our trialing process. And now they're out in the landscape to see if they can still stand up to weather conditions, not get black spot, not get powdery mildew. Do they continue to bloom? Which of course, what fun is a rose without any flowers?
Right.
So will they bloom without deadheading? So even though these roses mostly look really gorgeous, they're actually undergoing some pretty harsh conditions. Of course, they do get water because you can't really judge them if they don't get water. But one of these plants almost certainly is the next great rose for your garden.
Wow. You rose to the occasion. Beautiful.
One of the interesting things about what's happening in our rose trials right now, and I've talked about this on the show a couple times, is that, you know, initially disease-resistant landscape roses were kind of the thing, and they didn't have fragrance. But over the years, as breeders have been able to continue to work with those disease-resistant genetics, they're working on bringing the fragrance back into the plants. So a lot of these roses have really, really incredible fragrance. I wish you could smell them.
Stacey, when I stand in this beautiful garden, I think proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing, you know, we do a lot of talking on the Gardening Simplified show, But a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we talk a lot about Rose of Sharon.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or as you call them, Althea.
Yeah, or Althea.
Or Hibiscus syriacus, whatever you want to call it. I love these. They're really the epitome of summer. And I feel like I've been saying this over and over in this video, but this is one of my favorite plants. This is Paraplu Violet hibiscus, or Rose of Sharon. And it's one of those plants that you really just have to see to believe. There's something so otherworldly about its flower color. It just kind of seems to glow in the landscape. And you know, the other day we were talking about like moon gardens and how plants can kind of seem to glow in the landscape. I think this is such a great example. And it really has a nice refined habit, very, very floriferous, a very unique and unusual color. I'm just crazy about this plant.
And it blooms at the right time of year. We get into August, it's hot, we start to get a little weary.
Right,
This
like
is
you're
prime
talking,
time.
like you were talking about in our blue flower show.
Right.
It cools you in the landscape.
Exactly.
Another great reason to plant it. Hey Rick, do you like your flowers stripy?
Sometimes. This one, yes, I like it.
This is a really unique hibiscus, and like the one I just showed you, this is also in the Paraplu series. This series was developed in France, and it was developed for its very large flowers. This particular one was selected for these beautiful stripes. It's almost mesmerizing, right? Like you just get hypnotized when you look in there.
Oui, oui.
And these, like Paraplu Violet, also have that kind of like smaller, more refined shape. The foliage is a little bit softer and more delicate, and just covered in flowers. These plants are still a little bit young. These were just planted this year from a 2-gallon, but like most roses of Sharon, pretty fast growing and pretty deer resistant, which is good news for you and me.
Well, and on the show a few weeks ago, we talked about Poly Petite.
Oh, yeah.
And I just love these developed Rose of Sharon that have a controlled size to them and just so colorful.
So Rick, you know anyone who likes hydrangeas?
Oh, I love hydrangeas. This thing has gone kabloom. And you know what's interesting to me, Stacey, is we often talk about hydrangeas needing some protection. This is right out in the open.
Right, and this has been through a full winter. And I guess when we keep referring to this, but everybody's probably wondering what it is.
What is it?
This is Let's Dance Lovable, Reblooming Bigleaf Hydrangea. This is actually going to be new in garden centers in 2024. So this is probably a lot of people's first time seeing it. And this one was developed by Megan Matai, who you remember we had on the show
Megan.
a few
Yeah,
weeks ago.
great.
I think she mentioned this is one of the plants she's most proud of. And she was joking the other day, she was out here looking at this, and she said, yeah, it's pretty good. There's just one problem with it. Doesn't bloom enough.
Megan, wow.
And what's really cool about this, you can see, is that most of the flowers that you can see that are really colorful right now are the old wood blooms. So these were the buds that overwintered here in West Michigan from last fall and winter. But you can also see that this is a reblooming hydrangea that really does, because as you look through here, you can see that despite all these old wood flowers, you're actually getting these new wood flowers emerging right alongside. And that's long been one of the biggest issues, with reblooming hydrangeas, is that those new wood flowers, they just took too long to emerge.
Sure.
And so like maybe they would flower in September, but you're already buying mums. You're certainly not thinking about hydrangeas. So this is really a great example of the innovations that Megan and her team are bringing into hydrangeas.
Yeah, that's fantastic. They're not out in the parking lot. They are backstage ready to take center stage.
Yes, and you can see some of the more mature stems have a really nice purpley red color. This is probably about 7 plants, so it doesn't really just get this big. They're all kind of jammed together. But if you love that classic blue hydrangea summer look, Let's Dance Lovable will do well for you. Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I, again, was just recording.
Stacey, I'm very much into landscape roses and own-root roses only because they're a workhorse in the landscape. But how can a workhorse look so delicate and so beautiful, and then on top of all that, be so fragrant.
Isn't it great? So these are At Last roses, and these are actually in, I don't even know what count of bloom. So it's, like I said earlier, it's early August right now. So these already had like what is supposed to be their best spring bloom. And these were cut back, which is optional. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it does neaten the appearance. So you're gonna get something like this. So, I mean, imagine having roses bloom like this in early August. It almost looks like it's June again.
Ah, beautiful.
And At Last Rose, of course, has been a plant on trial before. And as you may recall, if you watched or listened to that episode, it's called At Last because it was one of the first fragrant disease-resistant landscape roses. And as Rick said, it also happens to be gorgeous. So here we have two plants that people are really, really excited about. There's been a lot of buzz on these two plants. Let's Dance Skyview Reblooming Hydrangea and Little Lime Punch Panicle Hydrangea.
Wow, that looks like a punch bowl of color. It's gorgeous.
They both are. And so one of the things that makes Let's Dance Skyview special is that it's one of those hydrangeas, and I think we've talked about this a bit on the show, that is able to set flower buds on the entire length of its stem. So regular conventional hydrangea macrophylla or bigleaf hydrangea, they mostly set their flower buds at the top or the terminals of the hydrangea. So if it gets killed by cold weather, if someone comes along and prunes it, there go the flower buds. But as you can see, with these buds emerging so low on the plants, that's because they're emerging from lower down on the stem. And the fact that this hydrangea is able to have all those extra flower buds means that even if there is a really cold winter or someone does inadvertently prune it, which of course we do not recommend, but we know happens.
It happens, yes.
This one can still bloom, and this has a beautiful purpley blue color. Of course, the flower color is going to depend on your soil chemistry, but typically if it's in an acidic soil and you have aluminum available, you're going to get into these beautiful like sky blue violet tones.
It's top to bottom blooming.
Right?
It's blooming all the way to the ground.
It's just irresistible when they're so like round and covered in flowers. Now, speaking of things that are covered in flowers all the way to the ground, this is Little Lime Punch, and I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about this.
Yes.
It's barely made it on the market, but people are really excited. Why? Because they loved Limelight, they loved Little Lime, and the difference with Little Lime Punch, you know, the flowers start out kind of cream, go to the classic green, which you can see in a lot of places here. But it's the flower color it takes on after that where things really get interesting, because you can see they're already starting to turn pink here in early August, which is great. So you don't have to wait all season for that to develop. But especially if you live in a cooler climate, those pink tones become really, really vivid. They have a punch pink color.
So Stacey, the panicle blooms almost look like, you know, at the carnival when they put ice in a cup and then they take food coloring and pour it over the ice and the colors change. And that's one of the great things about panicle hydrangeas, right? That
Yeah.
you know, the colors change as the season progresses.
Never a dull moment, just like the Gardening Simplified show.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Oh my word. Oh my word. That's sensational.
Isn't it? Yeah. Are you rolling? Good. I want to eat it.
Yeah, it's good enough to eat. Yes.
Are you still rolling?
Yeah.
Okay. So the plant that we are exclaiming over here, I know you can't really probably see a lot of the flowers, are kind of hidden by the foliage, but this is Simply Sensational Calycanthus, also known as Sweetshrub. And you know, a lot of the Calycanthus, sometimes they don't have a good fragrance, or they're only fragrant at certain times, like late in the evening or when the flowers are fading. And this one is truly, truly fragrant. And I hate to say this, but you really have to smell it for yourself, because
It smells delicious. That's the best way to describe it. It smells delicious. You want to eat the thing.
I do want to eat it. Like my mouth is watering from smelling this. So if you love fragrant plants, and I mean, we are getting close to this to really bury our noses in it, but I was actually over here to talk about these plants, and even just starting to look at them, I could smell the fragrance coming off of this plant. So if you love fragrance, and who doesn't, Simply Sensational Sweetshrub or Calycanthus. This is a newer variety, but a really nice choice for anyone who loves fragrance or native plants. But This one's not native, but also very fabulous and recently featured in Plants on Trial. These are the center stage Crapemyrtles, another plant from Megan Matai, who was one of our guests. And you can see these have actually been in the ground here in Michigan. So this is what they look like after they've been knocked back by a winter, because here in West Michigan, we're about a USDA zone 6B. So usually our winters are severe enough that they'll die back to the ground. But then they'll just pop right back up and start flowering. So this is center stage pink. Over here we have my personal favorite, center stage red. And these are really just starting to get going. So they have a lot of buds on them. The flowers are really just getting started.
So here in Michigan, it holds back the size comparatively to the south, but it certainly doesn't diminish the quality of the bloom.
It does not hold back the color. So we dragged Adriana out from behind the camera and behind the soundboard to tell you about one of her favorite plants in the trial garden, Miss Molly Butterfly Bush.
Yeah, I love Miss Molly. I think it was probably the first plant I fell in love with starting with Proven Winners ColorChoice. I always love Budley. It's kind of one of those nostalgic plants for me. The fragrance, but the color on Miss Molly is just so vibrant and stunning. And I think I have probably a billion different shots of pollinators on it. So it's a perfect size. I like how the stems are more upright in the habits. Not really columnar. I don't know if I would call it that per se. But it's a little more upright rather than stout, which the Pugster series can be a little more dwarfy. So I like that it looks whimsical and wispy, and when you see butterflies flying through it, it just feels like a dream.
Usually there are butterflies. I think we scared them away.
Probably.
Now, Stacey, some people like variegation in the landscape, and we recently did a show on variegation. This is a beauty.
Yeah, this has a really unique variegation. This is Bubbly Wine Weigela, one of our newer varieties, another one that's just starting to come on the market. But if you are a fan of variegation or just colorful shrubs in your landscape, this is such a great choice. I love how neat and tidy it is. You know, variegation sometimes it can be too much.
Too busy, yeah.
You know, too busy. I think this one is really just perfect. Even in this mass planting, it doesn't seem like it's too overwhelming. And this is a plant that was actually developed here in Michigan, but not by us at Proven Winners ColorChoice Shrubs, but it was selected over on the east side of the state. So good hardiness, and this is just a really nice plant if you want like a lot of color without a lot of maintenance, like most Weigela. What are you doing? Think we can't see you?
Good hiding spots are instrumental to a chipmunk's life.
So at this point in the tour, I kind of shudder to think how many times I've said this is one of my favorite plants. I hope no one was keeping count, but this really is one of my absolute favorite plants. And this is quite new and it's very different. So the name of this plant is El Niño chitalpa. And you probably haven't heard that genus before, that type of plant. It's a hybrid between Chelopsis, our native desert willow that's native to the Southwest, and chitalpa, which is, you know, they call it all sorts of different things, but it gets the big leaves and the big white flowers in like early summer. You can kind of see that reflected in these. We call it desert orchid because the flowers do indeed resemble orchids, and they have the most amazing fragrance. So we were just talking about the Simply Sensational Calycanthus, which has kind of a fruity, more edible fragrance. This one has a fragrance that's just like perfume, and I think it's best characterized as a combination of ripe melon and vanilla, but you really have to smell it to believe it. And so this is hardy to about USDA zone 6. It will sometimes here die back to the ground, but just like the crepe myrtle that we were talking about, it will come right back up, and then it puts out these amazing spikes of these beautiful, intricate flowers all summer long. And this is definitely one of those that if it's in your garden, the fragrance will just kind of waft in on the breeze and you'll be like, oh my gosh, what is that? So if you're looking for something a little bit different, if you say, Stacey, Rick, you guys talk about hydrangeas too much, can you show me something I don't know? This is it. El Niño chitalpa or desert orchid.
So Stacey, you're one of the people that have taught me a love of hydrangeas, and I know everybody loves macrophyllus and Panicle hydrangeas, but smooth hydrangeas, I kind of had to develop a love for them, and wow, just with the new introductions, it's just
there's a softness
gorgeous.
to it that
It's
can
a
actually
softness,
be quite nice.
Yeah.
And, you know, these obviously we've had a bunch of really heavy rain. Most of these are unintroduced varieties that we're just kind of trialing. But, you know, Annabelle really made a name for smooth hydrangeas. And then we have worked to improve that with plants like Incredible and so on. You know, it's hard to say, like, if you're only going to have one hydrangea, you know, what would it be? But what a tour it has been seeing all the hydrangeas in our trial and display gardens here this year, right?
It's a kick in the plants, I tell you what. And like I said at the outset, the proof is in the pudding. Like this, just that classic look. Oh, I love it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for our tour. This won't be the last. We can definitely show you more in the future, but we really appreciate you listening to the show, watching the show, subscribing, however you get the Gardening Simplified show. We really appreciate you.
Thanks so much.